The night Rebecca Farrow's husband disappeared into the darkening prairie, she made a silent promise to never trust another man's word again. The year was 1872, and the unforgiving Arizona Territory had a way of stealing dreams faster than a sudden summer storm. Rebecca stood on the weathered porch of their homestead just outside Wilcox, Arizona Territory, her hand shielding her eyes from the setting sun as Daniel Farrow rode away with their life savings, claiming he was heading to Tucson for supplies and to settle a land deal. The dust from his horse's hooves had barely settled when Rebecca realized, with a sickening certainty, that he wasn't coming back. "Ma, when's Pa coming home?" 6-year-old Thomas tugged at her skirt, his face upturned and innocent. Rebecca swallowed hard, refusing to let the tears fall. "I don't know, sweetheart." She wouldn't lie to her son, not when Daniel had told enough lies for both of them. 3 weeks passed with no word. The small garden behind their modest home yielded barely enough to feed Rebecca and Thomas, and the single cow Daniel had left behind provided milk, but winter would come eventually. Rebecca took to mending clothes for folks in town, making the 4-mile journey on foot, Thomas trailing beside her. It was during one of these trips, with a bundle of mended shirts balanced on her hip, that Rebecca first noticed the stranger. Tall and broad-shouldered with a face weathered by sun and wind, he stood outside the general store, talking with the owner, Mr. Jenkins. His eyes, blue as a summer sky, caught hers for just a moment before she hurriedly looked away. "Mrs. Farrow!" Mr. Jenkins called out. "Got your flour and coffee set aside like you asked?" Rebecca nodded gratefully, conscious of the stranger's gaze. "Thank you. I've brought Mr. Peterson's shirts and Mrs. Whitaker's tablecloth." "Fine work as always," Mr. Jenkins praised, examining the neat stitches. "Oh, let me introduce you to Mr. Nathan Grayson. Just rode in from Colorado. Nathan, this is Mrs. Rebecca Farrow." The stranger tipped his hat politely. "Madam." Rebecca managed a tight nod. "Mr. Grayson?" "Mr. Grayson's looking for work," Jenkins continued. "Good with horses, so I hear." "I'm afraid I can't help with that," Rebecca replied, her tone clipped. The last thing she needed was another man making promises he wouldn't keep. Later that afternoon, as Rebecca and Thomas made their way home, the sound of approaching hoofbeats caused her to stiffen. She pulled Thomas closer to her side, ready to step off the dusty road. "Mrs. Farrow," called a now familiar voice. Nathan Grayson rode up beside them, his chestnut mare slowing to a walk. "Would you and your boy like a ride home? Sun's mighty hot today." Rebecca's refusal was immediate. "No, thank you. We're fine walking." "Ma, I'm tired," Thomas whispered, his small face flushed from the heat. Nathan dismounted, leading his horse. "At least let me walk with you then. These roads aren't always safe." Rebecca hesitated, looking at Thomas's weary face. "Very well, Mr. Grayson." As they walked, Nathan kept a respectful distance. "Jenkins tells me you're out here alone with your boy. That's a tough row to hoe." "We manage," Rebecca said stiffly. "I don't doubt it. But winter's coming." "I'm aware of the seasons, Mr. Grayson." Nathan's laugh was unexpected, a warm sound that momentarily softened the hard edges of Rebecca's resolve. "Fair enough, Mrs. Farrow. I'm just saying, I'm looking for honest work. Your place could probably use some repairs before the cold sets in." Rebecca glanced at him sideways. "I can't pay you. I'm not asking for money. Room and board would be fine. Plus, I've been on the trail a long time. Wouldn't mind staying put for a while." They reached the turnoff to Rebecca's homestead, and she stopped, studying him with suspicion. "Why would you help strangers for nothing but meals and a place to sleep?" Nathan's eyes met hers, steady and clear. "Not everyone has an angle, Mrs. Farrow. In my experience, Mr. Grayson, they do." The next morning, Rebecca was startled by a knock at her door. Opening it cautiously, she found Nathan Grayson standing there, hat in hand, a toolkit by his feet. "Mr. Grayson, what are you doing here?" "Thought I'd start on those repairs." His gaze traveled to the sagging porch roof. That looks like it might not hold through a heavy rain. Rebecca crossed her arms. I didn't agree to your offer. No, madam, you didn't. But your roof did. He smiled, and Rebecca found herself noticing the crinkles around his eyes. I'll be on my way after I fix it, if that's what you want. From inside, Thomas called out. Ma, who is it? Rebecca hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. The roof did need fixing. And Daniel had left them with so little. It's Mr. Grayson, she finally answered. He's going to fix our roof. Nathan's smile widened. Much obliged, Mrs. Farrow. By midday, the sound of hammering had become a steady rhythm. Rebecca brought out a jar of water, watching as Nathan worked efficiently, his sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms tanned by the sun. How's it coming along? She asked. Nathan wiped his brow with a bandana. Good. Should hold through anything short of Noah's flood now. He took a long drink. You've got a nice place here. Good land. It was my father's, Rebecca said, surprising herself by offering the information. He left it to me when he died 3 years ago. My husband and I moved out from St. Louis to claim it. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. And your husband? Rebecca's expression shuddered. He went to Tucson 3 weeks ago. For supplies. Nathan's gaze was too perceptive for comfort. And you don't expect him back. That's not your concern, Mr. Grayson. Rebecca took the empty jar. I'll have dinner ready at sundown if you'd like to join us before you head back to town. That evening, as they ate a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Thomas peppered Nathan with questions about his travels. Rebecca found herself listening, despite her determination to keep her guard up. Have you ever shot a real outlaw? Thomas asked, eyes wide. Nathan chuckled. No, son. I try to avoid trouble, not find it. Pa said he shot an outlaw once in Texas, Thomas said proudly. Rebecca saw Nathan's quick glance in her direction but was grateful when he simply smiled at Thomas. Is that so? Well, Texas is full of tall tales. After Thomas was tucked in bed, Rebecca stepped onto the porch where Nathan sat smoking a cigarette. The night was cool, stars scattered like silver coins across the black expanse. I should thank you for the roof, Rebecca said stiffly. Nathan exhaled a stream of smoke. No need. Happy to help. A moment of silence stretched between them before Rebecca spoke again. He's not coming back. Daniel, my husband. He took our savings. Left us with almost nothing. The admission burned her throat like whiskey. Nathan studied the glowing tip of his cigarette. Some men don't deserve the families they have. I was a fool to trust him. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. But he was charming. Full of big plans and bigger promises. You weren't a fool. You were in love. Rebecca looked out at the darkness. Same thing, apparently. Nathan stood, crushing out his cigarette. I should get back to town. It's late. The barn has a decent loft if you want to sleep there tonight. Nathan considered her offer. If you're sure. I am. And? Rebecca hesitated. If you meant what you said about work for room and board, I could use the help. Just until winter. Nathan's smile was warm in the moonlight. I'll be here in the morning, Mrs. Farrow. Rebecca, she corrected softly. If you're staying, you might as well use my name. The days turned into weeks, and Nathan became a steady presence on the homestead. He fixed the barn door, mended fences, dug a new well closer to the house, and even managed to coax more milk from their stubborn cow than Rebecca had thought possible. Thomas took to following Nathan around like a shadow, absorbing everything from how to properly saddle a horse to the right way to split firewood. Rebecca watched their growing bond with a mixture of gratitude and fear, gratitude for the male influence Thomas so desperately needed, and fear of what would happen when Nathan inevitably moved on. One crisp October morning, Rebecca found Nathan in the barn, brushing down his mare. You've been here nearly a month, she said without preamble. Nathan continued brushing. Planning to evict me? No. I just. I'm trying to understand why you're still here. Surely there are better opportunities elsewhere. Nathan set the brush down and turned to face her. Maybe I like it here. On a struggling homestead with a widow and child? I doubt that. You're not a widow, Rebecca. You're a woman whose husband abandoned her. There's a difference. Rebecca flinched as if he'd struck her. That's not your place to say. Isn't it? I've been here long enough to see how you flinch whenever someone mentions him. How you stay up at night worrying about how you'll manage. How you've convinced yourself you're not worth staying for. You know nothing about me. Rebecca snapped, even as his words struck uncomfortably close to the truth. Nathan stepped closer. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. I know you love your son fiercely. I know you deserve better than what life's handed you so far. Rebecca's breath caught in her throat at the intensity in his blue eyes. Why do you care? Because I've spent my whole life moving from place to place, never finding anywhere that felt right. Until now. Rebecca took a step back, suddenly afraid not of Nathan, but of the fluttering hope his words kindled in her chest. You'll leave too. Everyone does. Nathan's voice was quiet but firm. I'll stay till you believe I won't leave. The promise hung between them, fragile and weighted with possibility. That evening, a thunderstorm rolled in, fierce and sudden as only desert storms can be. Rebecca hurried to close windows as rain lashed against the house and thunder shook the walls. Thomas, frightened by the noise, huddled close to her. A loud crack from outside sent Rebecca to the window. Lightning had struck one of the old cottonwood trees near the barn, splitting it down the middle. Half of it had fallen onto the barn roof. Nathan! She gasped, suddenly terrified. He'd gone out to check on the animals just before the storm hit. Ignoring the rain, Rebecca rushed toward the door, only to have it burst open before she reached it. Nathan stood there, soaked to the skin, a frightened lamb cradled in his arms. The tree hit the barn, he panted. Roof's damaged, but the animals are safe. Relief flooded through Rebecca. Without thinking, she threw her arms around him, heedless of the water soaking into her dress. Nathan stiffened in surprise before his free arm came around her, holding her close. I thought you might be hurt, she murmured against his chest. Takes more than a tree to get rid of me, he replied, his voice gentle. Rebecca pulled back, suddenly aware of their closeness. Thomas watched them with wide eyes, the storm momentarily forgotten. Let me get you a towel, Rebecca said, stepping away. Later, after the lamb had been settled by the fire and Thomas had fallen asleep, Rebecca and Nathan sat at the kitchen table, a pot of coffee between them. The storm still raged outside, but it seemed distant now, less threatening. I'll start on the barn roof tomorrow, Nathan said, his hands cupped around a steaming mug. Rebecca nodded. I appreciate all you've done, Nathan. We couldn't have managed without you. You would have found a way. You're resourceful. Perhaps. But it would have been harder. Rebecca hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind. Have you ever been married? Nathan shook his head. No. Came close once, back in Colorado. Emily was her name. Her father owned the ranch where I worked. What happened? She wanted to move east. Hated ranch life. I couldn't imagine living in a city. Nathan's smile was rueful. Sometimes loving someone isn't enough if your dreams don't align. I think Daniel never loved me at all, Rebecca admitted, the words less painful than she'd expected. He loved the idea of me, the proper St. Louis girl who could help him appear respectable. But once we got out here, once he realized how hard homesteading is. She shrugged. He found the first excuse to leave. His loss, Nathan said simply. Any man would be lucky to have you by his side. Their eyes met across the table, and Rebecca felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the coffee. For the first time since Daniel had ridden away, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't alone. The next day dawned clear and bright, the storm leaving behind puddles and debris but no lasting damage except to the barn. Nathan worked through the day repairing the roof, while Rebecca took stock of their winter preparations. Despite the setback with the barn, they were in better shape than she'd dared hope. As the sun began to set, Rebecca heard the sound of approaching riders. Stepping onto the porch, she shaded her eyes against the glare to see 3 men on horseback approaching the house. Her heart raced with sudden fear. "Nathan!" she called, relieved when he immediately appeared from the barn. The riders came to a stop in front of the house. The man in front, thin-faced with cold eyes, looked from Rebecca to Nathan with an unpleasant smile. "Well, well. Daniel said you were pretty, but he didn't mention you'd replaced him so quick." Rebecca stiffened. "Who are you?" "Name's Harlan Wicks. Your husband owes me money, Mrs. Farrow. A considerable sum." Nathan moved to stand beside Rebecca, his stance protective. "Whatever business you have with Daniel Farrow, it's with him, not his wife." Wicks' smile disappeared. "See, that's where you're wrong, Cowboy. Daniel put up this land as collateral for his loans. Said his wife would sign the papers if anything happened to delay his payment. I never agreed to that," Rebecca protested. "This land is mine, inherited from my father." "That may be, madam, but your husband's debts are legally yours too. And since he's disappeared without a trace." Wicks shrugged. "I'm here to collect." Nathan's voice was dangerously calm. "Mrs. Farrow isn't signing anything. I suggest you take your business elsewhere." The men with Wicks shifted restlessly, hands hovering near their guns. Rebecca's fear spiked, but Nathan remained steady beside her. Wicks' eyes narrowed. "You've got no say in this, stranger. I have plenty of say when someone tries to swindle a woman out of her property." Nathan's hand didn't move toward his gun, but there was no mistaking the threat in his stance. "Now, unless you have legal paperwork signed by both Mr. and Mrs. Farrow, I suggest you leave before things get unpleasant." For a tense moment, Rebecca thought Wicks might order his men to attack. Instead, he spat on the ground. "This isn't over. I'll be back with the sheriff and proper papers." Daniel signed something, and that's binding enough to start proceedings. "We'll see about that," Nathan replied evenly. With a final glare, Wicks wheeled his horse around, and the 3 men rode away. Only when they were out of sight did Rebecca let out the breath she'd been holding. "Did you know about this?" Nathan asked quietly. Rebecca shook her head, hands trembling. "No. Daniel never mentioned borrowing money. But it doesn't surprise me. He always wanted more than we had." Nathan's jaw tightened. "We need to ride into town tomorrow, talk to the sheriff. Find out if Wicks is bluffing or if Daniel really did something that could put your land at risk. What if he did? What if Daniel signed something that gives that man a claim?" Nathan took her hands in his, steadying them. "Then we'll fight it. I won't let you lose your home, Rebecca. I promise you that." Rebecca looked up at him, seeing the determination in his eyes. For the first time since Daniel left, she allowed herself to fully trust someone else. "All right. We'll go to town tomorrow." The next morning, they set out for Wilcox, Thomas riding in front of Nathan on his mare. The boy had been frightened by the confrontation with Wicks, clinging to Rebecca all night. Now, secure in Nathan's strong arms, he seemed to have recovered his spirits. Sheriff Tucker was a grizzled veteran of the frontier, his weathered face impassive as Rebecca explained the situation. When she finished, he pulled out a folder and laid some papers on his desk. "Wicks came to me 2 days ago with these. It's a promissory note signed by Daniel Farrow, using the homestead as collateral for a loan of $500. Rebecca gasped. "500? That's more than the place is worth." "Wicks runs games at his saloon over in Benson. I reckon your husband got in deep at the tables, not with a legitimate loan." The sheriff rubbed his chin. "Problem is, his signature's here plain as day. And while he'd need your signature too for a proper deed transfer, this is enough to cause you trouble." Nathan studied the paper. "When was this signed?" 3 weeks ago. Right before Daniel Farrow supposedly left for Tucson." Rebecca felt sick. Daniel had never intended to return. He'd gambled away their savings, put her land at risk, and abandoned them without a backward glance. "What can we do?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. Sheriff Tucker sighed. "Well, since you didn't sign it and weren't aware, we might have a case. But legal matters move slow out here. Wicks could make things difficult while the courts decide. We'll need a lawyer," Nathan said decisively. "Closest one's in Tucson," the sheriff replied. "Good man named James Sullivan. Handles most of the legal matters for this county." Rebecca's heart sank. "I can't afford a lawyer. I've got some savings," Nathan said quietly. "Enough to retain Sullivan, at least." Rebecca stared at him. "Nathan, no. This isn't your fight. I told you I'd stay until you believed I wouldn't leave," he reminded her. "That means seeing this through." On the ride back to the homestead, Rebecca was silent, her mind churning with the day's revelations. Daniel's betrayal was even worse than she'd imagined. And now Nathan was offering to spend his savings to help her fight a battle that wasn't his. "Why?" she finally asked as they neared home. "Why would you do this for us?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, his eyes on the horizon. "When I first came to Wilcox, I was just passing through. Another town, another temporary job. I've been drifting for years, never finding a reason to put down roots." He looked at her then, his gaze unwavering. "Until I met you and Thomas." Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. "Nathan. I'm not asking for anything, Rebecca. I know you're still healing from what Daniel did. All I'm saying is that this isn't just your fight anymore. It's ours." That night, after Thomas was asleep, Rebecca sat on the porch steps, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the chill. Nathan joined her, offering a cup of coffee which she accepted gratefully. "I wrote to Sullivan," he said. "Asked him to come out here rather than us going to Tucson. Explained the situation." Rebecca nodded. "Thank you. I can't bear the thought of leaving the homestead right now, not with Wicks circling like a vulture." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the vast desert sky spread above them, stars twinkling like distant campfires. "I keep thinking about what Daniel must have been feeling," Rebecca said eventually. "To gamble away our future, to leave his son without a word. What kind of man does that?" "A weak one," Nathan replied simply. "A man who couldn't face his responsibilities or his failures. I blamed myself at first. Thought I hadn't been enough for him somehow." Nathan's hand found hers in the darkness. "It was never about you, Rebecca. Some people are just running from themselves. Nothing and no one can make them stay." Rebecca's fingers tightened around his. "And some people stay even when they have every reason to go." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition of feelings that had been growing steadily despite Rebecca's efforts to guard her heart. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Nathan leaned forward. His lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not him," Nathan whispered. "I won't leave you." "I'm starting to believe that," Rebecca replied, her voice trembling. 2 days later, James Sullivan arrived from Tucson, a precise man with spectacles and a no-nonsense manner that Rebecca found reassuring. After reviewing the paperwork and hearing their story, he nodded thoughtfully. "Wicks is trying to pull a fast one," he concluded. "The document Daniel signed isn't legally binding without your signature, Mrs. Farrow, especially since the property was your inheritance. However, Daniel could have created other obligations we don't know about yet. What do you suggest?" Nathan asked. "First, we file a formal complaint against Wicks for attempted fraud. Then, we need to establish that Daniel has abandoned the marriage. That would legally protect Mrs. Farrow from any future claims he might make, or debts he might incur." Rebecca took a deep breath. "And how do we do that?" "Given the circumstances, and with witnesses who can testify that he left with no intention of returning, we can petition for a decree of abandonment. It's not a full divorce, but it would legally separate your affairs from his." The process was neither quick nor easy. Over the next month, Rebecca found herself making multiple trips to town, giving statements to the sheriff, and signing papers for Sullivan. Through it all, Nathan remained steadfast, handling the homestead when she couldn't, accompanying her to town, standing by her side when Wicks tried to intimidate her. Word spread through Wilcox about Daniel Farrow's abandonment, and Wicks' attempts to claim the land. To Rebecca's surprise, the townspeople rallied around her. Mrs. Jenkins brought food, the blacksmith offered to shoe their horses for free, and even old Mrs. Whitaker, notoriously tight with her money, paid double for Rebecca's sewing. "People respect how you've handled this," Nathan told her one evening as they sat by the fire, Thomas asleep with his head in Rebecca's lap. "You didn't run, you didn't fall apart. You stood your ground." Rebecca stroked her son's hair. "I had help." Nathan smiled, the firelight casting warm shadows across his face. "You would have managed even without me. But I'm glad I was here." "So am I," Rebecca whispered. When Sullivan returned in late November with the official decree of abandonment, Rebecca felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The document legally protected her property from Daniel's creditors and established that he had willfully deserted his family. "Wicks won't trouble you anymore," Sullivan assured her. "He knows he has no legal claim. And if Daniel ever returns—" The lawyer adjusted his spectacles. "Well, he'll find his rights to this property have been severed." After Sullivan left, Rebecca stood in the yard, looking out over the land that was now unquestionably hers alone. Nathan came to stand beside her, his presence warm and solid. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Nathan turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "That depends on you, Rebecca." She met his gaze, seeing in his eyes the future she'd been afraid to hope for. "The decree isn't a divorce. I'm still married, legally speaking." "I know. And I respect that." Nathan squeezed her hands gently. "But I meant what I said. I'll stay as long as you want me here as your friend, as Thomas's teacher, as your partner in whatever way you're comfortable with." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "You would do that? Wait for something that might never be legally possible. Some things are worth waiting for." Nathan's smile was tender. "Besides, I made you a promise. I'll stay till you believe I won't leave." Rebecca reached up to touch his cheek. "I believe you, Nathan. I think I have for a while now." The first snow of winter fell that night, blanketing the homestead in pristine white. Rebecca stood at the window, watching the flakes drift down in the moonlight, when she felt Nathan's arms encircle her from behind. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he murmured. Rebecca leaned back against his chest, feeling truly safe for the first time in months. "Yes, it is." They faced the winter together, the three of them forming a family bound not by law but by choice and love. Nathan taught Thomas to track rabbits in the snow, built a proper ice house for storing food, and even surprised Rebecca with a Christmas tree cut from the hills beyond their property. On Christmas morning, Thomas squealed with delight at the wooden horse Nathan had carved for him. "It looks just like your mare." "That's the idea." Nathan laughed, ruffling the boy's hair. "Every cowboy needs a good horse." "Am I a cowboy, Nathan?" Thomas asked eagerly. Nathan glanced at Rebecca, who nodded her permission. "You sure are, son. The best young cowboy in all of Arizona Territory." Rebecca handed Nathan a package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, but—" Nathan unwrapped it carefully, revealing a new bandana embroidered with his initials. "It's perfect," he said, genuinely touched. "Thank you. I have something for you too," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small wooden box, carved with delicate flowers. "Open it." Inside, Rebecca found a silver ring set with a small turquoise stone. "Nathan. It was my mother's," he explained. "I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." He took her hand. "I know we can't make promises the law would recognize. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I want you to have this as a symbol of my promise to you and Thomas." Rebecca slipped the ring onto her right hand, where it caught the morning light. "It's beautiful. Like you." Nathan said simply. Spring came early that year, bringing new growth to the land and new hope to Rebecca's heart. Sullivan wrote from Tucson with news that Daniel had been spotted in El Paso, heading east with a gambling party. He showed no interest in returning to Arizona, which Sullivan said strengthened their case should Rebecca ever seek a formal divorce. One warm evening in April, as wildflowers dotted the landscape with splashes of color, Rebecca and Nathan walked hand in hand along the creek that bordered their property. Thomas ran ahead, chasing butterflies and collecting interesting rocks. "I've been thinking," Nathan said, watching Thomas with affection. "The south pasture would be perfect for raising horses. I've got a contact in Santa Fe who breeds Morgans. Strong, steady animals that would do well here." "You're making plans?" Rebecca observed, smiling up at him. "For our future, yes." Nathan stopped, turning to face her. "If that's what you want to." Rebecca's answer was in her kiss, in the way her arms wound around his neck, in the soft sigh that escaped her when they parted. "It's exactly what I want." As the years passed, the Farrow homestead became known throughout the territory for its fine horses, bred and trained by Nathan Grayson. Rebecca's sewing business flourished into a small dress shop in Wilcox, where her designs were sought after by women from as far away as Tucson. Thomas grew into a strong young man, with Daniel's dark hair but Nathan's steady character and work ethic. And in time, he was joined by a sister, little Sarah, who arrived on a snowy night in December 1875, with Nathan pacing anxiously outside the bedroom door until the midwife placed the tiny bundle in his arms. Though the law never recognized what was obvious to everyone else, that Nathan and Rebecca were husband and wife in every way that mattered, they found their own path. When Daniel Farrow's body was discovered in a Mississippi River gambling boat following a dispute over cards in 1880, Sullivan ensured that Rebecca received the legal closure she deserved. On a golden autumn afternoon in 1881, almost 10 years after Nathan first fixed her roof, Rebecca stood with him under an arch of flowers in the yard of their prosperous ranch. Before their friends and neighbors, with Thomas standing proud as best man and 9-year-old Sarah scattering petals, they finally exchanged the vows they had lived by for years. "I knew you wouldn't leave," Rebecca whispered as they shared their first dance as a legally married couple. Nathan's arms tightened around her waist. "I told you I'd stay till you believed it." Rebecca rested her head on his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. "I believe it. I always will." And as the sun set over the Arizona hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Rebecca Farrow Grayson knew that some promises were meant to be kept forever.